Earlier today, I asked, are Americans fickle people? And is that part of our problem? Do we ride that emotional roller coaster, and do we allow our hope to be tied to an emotion rather than understanding that hope is so much more and it must be steadfast? We must be steadfast. And on my walk this afternoon, I was once again listening to Rebecca Solnit's Hope in the Dark. That would be the fourth time this year I've reread it. Also, I just got to brag here really quickly. A couple of days ago, Rebecca reshared one of my Facebook posts. I don't fangirl very often, but when I do, it's going to be over Rebecca Solnit or Robin Wall Kimmerer. So listening to Rebecca's book again today reminded me of a piece that The Marginalian did a little while ago covering Rebecca and her writing. And I don't believe I've shared any of this piece before. I've shared from other pieces The Marginalian Maria Popova has covered. This is Rebecca Solnit on Hope in Dark Times, resisting the defeatism of easy despair and what victory means for movements of social change. I think what Maria and Rebecca touch on here very much covers that question I had earlier today about our fickleness, about our tendency to ride the highs and lows, to kind of enjoy being on that roller coaster. There is no love of life without despair of life, wrote Albert Camus, a man who in the midst of World War II, perhaps the darkest period in human history, saw grounds for luminous hope and issued a remarkable clarion call for humanity to rise to its highest potential on those grounds. It was his way of honoring the same duality that artist Myra Kalman would capture nearly a century later in her marvelous meditation on the pursuit of happiness, where she observed, "We hope, we despair. We hope, we despair. That is what governs us. We have a bipolar system." In my own reflections of hope, cynicism, and the stories we tell ourselves, I've considered the necessity of those two poles working in concert. Indeed, the stories we tell ourselves about those poles matter. The stories we tell ourselves about our public past shape how we interpret and respond to and show up for the present. The stories we tell ourselves about our private past shape how we come to see our own personhood and who ultimately we become. The thin line between agency and victimhood is drawn in how we tell these stories. The language in which we tell ourselves these stories matters tremendously too, and no writer has weighed the complexities of sustaining hope in our times of readily available despair more thoughtfully and beautifully, nor with greater nuance than Rebecca Solnit does in Hope in the Dark, Untold Stories, Wild Possibilities. I'm telling y'all, that book is a lifeline for me. I cannot recommend it enough. Solnit writes in the foreword of her 2016 edition of this book, "Hope is a gift you don't have to surrender, a power you don't have to throw away. And though hope can be an act of defiance, defiance isn't enough reason to hope. But there are good reasons." Solnit, one of the most singular, civically significant, and poetically potent voices of our time, emanating echoes of Virginia Woolf's luminous prose and Adrienne Rich's unflinching political conviction. That is such a good way of describing her. Originally wrote these essays in 2003, 6 weeks after the start of the Iraq War, in an effort to speak directly to the inner life of the politics of the moment, to the emotions and preconceptions that underlie our political positions and engagement. Although the specific conditions of the day may have shifted, their undergirding causes and far-reaching consequences have only gained in relevance and urgency in the years since. This slim book of tremendous potency is therefore, today more than ever, an indispensable ally to every thinking, feeling, civically conscious human being. And almost another decade has passed since this piece was written, and yet her book is more potent and more sustaining and more informative than ever. Rebecca says of progressive populist grassroots organizing that we have had many victories and the most wildly, unimaginably magnificent things have come to pass. She also says popular power has continued to be a profound force for change, and the changes we've undergone, both wonderful and terrible, are astonishing. The time we are living in now is an extraordinary time, full of vital, transformative moments that could not be foreseen. It's also a nightmarish time. Full engagement requires the ability to perceive both. We're not here to play Pollyanna and pretend the terrible things aren't happening. We're not here to give a false sense of ease. We're not here to fuel our own complacency. We're here to address the terrible things head on so that we can work to stop them and to build something better. We cannot minimize how terrible things are right now. We cannot turn a blind eye to the cruelty that is just abundant in our culture at the moment. We can't pretend the suffering isn't there. That's the reality of living in the United States in 2025. It's not a good scene. Rebecca tells us hope doesn't mean that you have to deny the reality of what is happening. It means you face it and address it head on. But also look back on moments in the past when terrible things were happening and realize that there were good things happening alongside at the same time. And that's true today as well. New movements, new heroes, new shifts in consciousness, those often accompany dark times. Popova says, with great care, Solnit, whose mind remains the sharpest instrument of nuance I've encountered, maps the uneven terrain of our grounds for hope. And then she quotes one of my favorite passages that Rebecca has written in this book. It's important to say what hope is not. It is not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of tremendous suffering and tremendous destruction. The hope I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities, ones that invite or demand that we act. It's also not a sunny, everything is getting better narrative, though it may be a counter to the everything is getting worse narrative. You could call it an account of complexities and uncertainties with openings. That line, I'm interested in broad perspectives with specific possibilities, that reminds me of the permaculture principle of design from patterns to details. I also love that she frames hope as an embrace of the fact that the situation we're in is incredibly complex and that the outcome is uncertain. You know, I'm always talking about how the future is not yet written. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that uncertainty for us should be a tremendous source of hope. In fact, Solnit talks a lot about how surrendering to uncertainty is one of the ways that we rekindle our hope. Rebecca says, hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcomes, you alone, or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. Hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Optimists think it will all be fine without our involvement. Pessimists take the opposite position. Both excuse themselves from acting. It's the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it will impact are not things we can know beforehand. We may not, in fact, know them afterward either, but they matter all the same. And history is full of people whose influence was most powerful after they were gone. I may have to make a part 2 to this video, but one of the things Rebecca's talking about here, about how we may not ever know what kind of impact our actions have, but they still matter. Just because we don't know the outcome, we can't see the ripple effect, we don't know who we reach, that doesn't mean that we're not impactful. For me, hope comes with a significant element of trust, that I am engaging in actions that I know are important, even if I can't see the results. I am trusting that the tree I'm planting now will yield fruit in the future. Likewise, I am trusting that as I am stepping out in courage, as I am stepping out to try and shape that future, that a few dozen or a few million other folks are as well. Hope and trust and solidarity, those all go together for me. And so earlier today, when I was talking about that roller coaster and how we're fickle people, maybe that roller coaster is important. Maybe that's something that people need to go on, because when they hit that trough at the bottom, they come back up. I want to leave it here with this quote from Rebecca, and then please come back for part 2. She says, there's a public equivalent to private depression, a sense that the nation or the society rather than the individual is stuck. Things don't always change for the better, but they change, and we can play a role in that change if we act, which is where hope comes in, and memory, the collective memory we call history. You row forward looking back, and telling this history is part of helping people navigate toward the future. We need a litany, a rosary, a sutra, a mantra, a war chant for our victories. The past is set in daylight, and it can become a torch we carry into the night that is the future.